There's a popular assumption that creativity is always a means to a positive end. While it is apparent that there are many benefits for society and individuals that arise from creative innovations, as well as the creative process itself, many do not consider that creativity can lead to negative outcomes. And for many years, creativity was only studied through the lens of positivity. In domains such as education, business, and science, we are striving to encourage creativity, encourage students to think more creatively, and hire candidates that can produce creative solutions and products. However, upon additional reflection and study, it becomes apparent that there are in fact negative outcomes that can and do happen as a result of the creative process. Assessing creativity as positive or negative assumes that we are assigning value to creative acts and outcomes, which in and of itself can have unintended outcomes. In order to understand the issues, we must understand how positive and negative creativity are defined. What does it mean to be positive or negative? According to the Oxford English Dictionary, for something to be positive, it must be characterized by the presence of qualities rather than their absence. In this sense, positive and negative are values that do not have moral implications. On the other hand, most of us use these terms to refer to events, individuals, and things with a value judgment. Hence, positive means good, moral, beneficial, useful, etc., while negative is used to describe things that are harmful, bad, and unethical. We understand creativity as producing ideas or products that are novel and useful, appropriate, or satisfying. In order to understand negative and malicious creativity, we must also understand that creativity also involves a goal. According to Keith James, creativity is goal-oriented and requires intent. It is this intent that allows us to measure creative outcomes as positive, negative, or malicious, and understand that even positive creativity can have unintended negative consequences. Negative creativity is understood as creativity that leads to products or events that are intended to achieve negative goals or selfish interests with possible harmful outcomes. Malevolent creativity differs from negative creativity in that the original goal is directed at intentionally causing harm to others or organizations. An example of negative creativity might be a student finding a creative way to cheat on a test, while malevolent creativity refers to things like creative terrorism. While intent may help us distinguish between positive, negative, and malevolent creativity, it is also important to note that even positive creativity can have unintended negative consequences. There are numerous large-scale examples of this in history. The most commonly referenced is Einstein's discovery of E equals mc squared and the eventual impact of that discovery when the science was used to create the atomic bomb, or how global warming is now an unintended negative consequence of the Industrial Revolution. And these examples further illustrate how creativity, even when aimed at positive goals, can have negative outcomes. The factors that influence whether a goal will be directed at positive, negative, or malevolent ends are largely environmental or internal factors of the individual. This means that there are many situational contexts that might influence someone to generate negative outcome goals, or there may be internal factors such as emotional state or personality characteristics. The environment has a profound effect on how creative goals are formed and channeled. Situations in the environment can influence whether goals become positive or negative. Creativity researchers have found that when positive creativity is hindered, that people often resort to negative creativity. In situations where there is a lack of perceived autonomy or control, or in environments with authoritarian styles of leadership, positive creativity is diminished. This often encourages individuals to develop negative goals or retaliatory goals to combat what is perceived as abuse from authority. Stress and time constraints in these type of environments can also lead to negative emotional states. These conditions are theorized to lead to negative creative goals. Along these same lines of thinking, negative and malevolent goals may also be generated as a response to perceived unfairness in groups and organizations. Positive social climate and feelings of security promote positive emotional states, and positive goals, and the inverse is thus understandable, that negative social climate and feelings of fear, threat, and hostility will likely lead to negative outcomes. One interesting thing is that while diversity within groups has been shown to increase positive creativity, this is dependent on whether or not the prevailing social norms promote positive actions between different groups and whether tolerance is promoted. In situations with high levels of diversity that lack tolerance and value indifference, the diversity often leads to feelings of uncertainty and conflict that undermines feelings of security. Cultural norms may also play a role in the type of goals that individuals generate. For example, cultures that promote aggression and outgroup hostility are theorized to be more likely to generate negative creative ideas. Some research suggests that masculine organizational cultures are more likely to promote these types of behaviors. Culture can refer to the culture of both large and small groups. For example, it might mean the culture of a classroom, business, or the larger society as a whole. In general, it has been found that creative types have more flexibility of thought that may be part of what allows them to generate creative ideas. It is the same flexibility of thought that also allows some individuals to justify their negative and malevolent goals to reframe them in a narrative that allows them to feel comfortable with committing actions that would otherwise be seen as immoral. Some research suggests that creative people may be more likely to engage in dishonest behavior such as lying or cheating. Other research using the Big Five or five-factor model of personality have found that creative types are more open to new experience, less conventional, and less conscientious, more self-confident, self-accepting, driven, ambitious, dominant, hostile, and impulsive. It's easy to see how these personality characteristics could be used in certain situations to direct creative goals in either positive or negative directions. It has been found, though, that creative individuals high in trait aggression and low in conscientiousness are more likely to produce malevolent creative ideas. While personality is one internal factor that influences creative outcome, another internal factor that is important is the emotional state of the individual. For example, it has been shown that individuals in a positive emotional state will be more likely to produce positive goals, and people in a negative emotional state more likely to produce negative goals. There are consequences of creativity that may be overlooked when viewing creativity as entirely beneficial for organizations and society. For example, creativity commonly upsets the status quo. This might be due to changes in procedure or development of new products or reconfiguration of power structures. This type of profound change can lead to disharmony among individuals in the group that may be resistant to said changes. New processes and procedures may also generate high costs in business or eliminate roles and positions. In cases like this, groups and organizations are often resistant to new ideas, and their benefit must outweigh the cost or be in the best interest of the prevailing powers. Researchers, Cassina et al., suggest that creativity itself and the creative process lead to disinhibition. Disinhibition is a mental state which may lead to increased creativity, but it also leads to lack of constraint and self-control. They argue that the process of creativity can also involve a disregard for social norms, conventions, and concerns, as creative people frequently break from the status quo and regularly call existing solutions into question. While these things can in fact be beneficial, those characteristics have also been known to threaten group dynamics and can lead to negative outcomes. Not only can creativity lead to negative outcomes for organizations or groups, it can also pose personal risk for the creative individual. Because there is often resistance to creativity, as shown in the previous slide, creative individuals must be willing to experience rejection and isolation, as many creative ideas do upset the status quo. Creative individuals may also have a hard time assimilating into groups in certain situations, as these individuals have shown to be independent, resistant to authority, unpredictable and more inclined to breaking the rules. Other risks associated with creativity and creative achievement are susceptibility to mental illness, as well as impulsivity and risk taking that can lead to problem behaviors. Some research suggests that doing creative work negatively predicts the amount of time spent with family at home. A historical example of the individual risk of creativity can be seen when Copernicus theorized that the sun was the center of our solar system rather than the earth. His ideas were so controversial and threatening to the established ideas of the time and the dogma of the Catholic Church that when other scientists such as Bruno supported his work, Bruno was burned at the stake. While creativity and creative individuals are often praised for their innovation and impact on society, this only happens if and when the usefulness and appropriateness of their ideas are accepted in line with the goals of the organization and body evaluating the creative product. Otherwise, their creativity will put them at risk for criticism and possible abuse. There are many possible issues with measuring or labeling creativity as negative, positive, or malevolent. For one, assigning a product or idea as negative or malevolent can have political and moral value. If we assume all creative terrorism is malevolent, we ignore that many creative acts that are considered negative or malevolent are attempts to seek justice, overthrow unjust regimes, seek freedom, or show resistance to oppression. For example, it becomes difficult to delineate why some might see military strategy as positive when it fits into the category of malevolent creativity by definition. If researchers assert that there is utility in understanding and studying negative and malevolent creativity, then we must be prepared to accept that there is political and power structures in play when assigning morality or value to processes. Morality is also not consistent across cultures or time, which adds additional complications to measurement. When measuring if something is novel and harmful, it also suggests that not all studies are conducted in a uniform way of measurement, and this poses problems when we consider that the label we are assigning could be used for many purposes, including propaganda, stigmatization of character traits. Some researchers, such as Mark Runco, have pointed out that creativity itself is neither positive or negative, as it is a process. While goals may be negative or positive, and the situations and factors that influence these goals and their outcomes may vary, the creative process itself is separate from the creative product. He states that the trick is to recognize that creativity is a form of deviance or unconventionality, not immoral or unethical, and then determine how and why it is sometimes used in benevolent ways and sometimes in malevolent ways. While creativity is a driving force in increasing the quality of life for humanity, a possible savior for the world's greatest problems, and clearly a skill that should be taught and nurtured, the bright side and benefits of creativity were not the topic of this discussion. Creativity has the ability to elevate mood and provide numerous benefits to the individual and humanity as a whole. It cannot be ignored that not all outcomes of creative process are positive or beneficial to everyone. Creative ideas and products can be used for malicious goals, and an understanding of the situations and contexts that cause the creative process to be used for negative purposes can help us prevent negative outcomes. However, as stated, there are some issues with measuring and understanding negative creativity. While researchers like Runco point out that care must be taken in labeling creativity as negative so as not to stigmatize creativity itself, and assert that the creative process itself is neutral, it bears some importance that other researchers have also suggested that participating in the creative process encourages mental states that lead to lack of self-control, overindulgence, arrogance, and a sense of entitlement. Being creative is risky, and its benefits do not come without cost. By nature, creativity requires a certain amount of rule breaking and deviance from the norm, and this is what makes creativity exciting. Creativity is the catalyst for change and advancement, but it will not come with no negative outcomes.